Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's morning, darling. Okay. Doctor, what an honor to be in your presence. How are you, sir?
No, thank you so much, Lebo. I'm doing well, thanks. And how are you doing today?
Nah, I'm okay. For the sake of our viewers, can you please just tell us your name and surname?
I am Dr. Ronnie Masilela.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. I would like to go back to humble beginnings. Where did you grow up, Doc?
Yeah, indeed. No, thank you for the question. And thank you also for adding the word humble, because they were, maybe to say humble, it's maybe not appropriate. They were quite less than humble. They were, I am from the poorest of the poor. I am from a space and an environment where in our life we admired poor people.
Yes.
We admired poor people because we considered them far better than we were.
Okay.
Yeah, okay now, but to get to answering your question, I grew up in a place, east of Pretoria.
Yes.
In the early 80s. We were removed from where we were originally in a place called Jackalsdans, and then we were removed to a place near Siabuswa called Pieterskral. That's where I stayed with my grandparents, because my mother was a domestic worker.
Yes.
And I've never known a father. The word father never featured in my vocabulary. So now we were extremely poor, and we were, apart from that, as if, poverty was not enough. We were also a family with a lot of weaklings in the family in terms of health issues. My grandmother and myself, we were the weaklings in the family because we were constantly ill. My mother had a persistent headache, and I also had a persistent headache, and I had a persistent cough. Yeah, and that was the background. And in that family, it was my grandmother, my grandfather, it was myself, my younger brother, and my cousin, who was almost the age of my younger brother.
Yes.
Yeah, and we also had an uncle, and we were very, very, very poor. But my grandfather tried to pull all the stops to ensure that he puts food on the table for us.
You're taking me back to my days where my grandmother made sure that we had food at the table. While my mother was out there working.
My mother at the time was a domestic worker in Cullinan, and she rarely visited us. I'm sure she also had her own issues trying to make ends meet.
Yes.
Yeah, in her space. Yes.
All right. Before I cry, let's move away from that. So, what were your interests while growing up as a child?
Yeah, my main interest at the time, because of the illness of my grandmother, my main interest at the time was to get my grandmother well, because I just feared that, this grandmother of mine is constantly ill, and somewhere along the line I will lose her. Yes. And I wanted to find a way of getting my grandmother to be well. And I think that's where the seed of becoming a doctor was planted. Wow. I really wanted to be a doctor. Yes. I ideally wanted to be a doctor so that I could save my grandmother's life. So now, but, it was difficult, and this then inculcated a culture in me to love education. Yes. Because I realized for me to become a doctor, I have to get an education.
Wow. Quite interesting. So before you became a doctor, you were in the broadcasting field. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Oh, okay. So can you just touch a bit on that? How did you get into broadcasting? And when was it, and for how long was it?
Yeah, now my life into broadcasting, this is what happened. In our area where we were at the time, it was a place far-flung from everything that matters. There was absolutely no entertainment. There was nothing. The only form of entertainment for us as children, was to play football in the streets.
Yes.
And then other than that, in 1967, my grandfather bought my grandmother a radio. Wow.
Wow.
And at that point, we had a radio for the very first time in the family. But this radio really fascinated us. And we looked at this little box, and there were voices coming from this box. And this box linked us with the outside world. And it came with very interesting stuff, And I fell in love. I fell in love with the voices on this little box. And we listened to a then called Radio Bantu, which later became Radio Zulu. And I fell in love, and these people were our icons. They were our heroes, and they are the ones who brought entertainment. It was very interesting to listen to the radio in the evening. You listen to these written stories written by the writers of the time, and there was music, and man, it really brought about a new dimension in our lives, and many of the radio presenters at the time, were so entertaining. They were so talented.
Yes.
We had people, at the time, there were people like Elijah Teta Masumbuga. Elijah Teta Masumbuga was the highlight of our weekends, because during weekends he would broadcast soccer. And we would, run to our radios, and because, he would bring soccer, the very same football that we were trying to play, and he brought it to us, over, through this little box. And then there were music programs.
Yes.
There were people like, Joshua Mlaba. Joshua Mlaba, one of the very rare talents ever produced in South Africa. Then you had a guy called Cyril Bongani Mkunu. He used to call himself the Kansas City. We had Alexius Buthelezi. We had Stanley Boy Khatebe, and wow. We had Mduduzi Hlope, and all those people, we idolized them. They brought something different into our lives.
Yes.
And now, I knew, let me put it this way, I knew that I was going to be a doctor by hook or crook. But I also knew that one day I'll be one of these guys.
Wow.
As to how that was going to pan out, how part of it I didn't know. But for sure, I assure you, yeah. I knew that one day I will be a broadcaster along these guys, but I will also be a doctor.
Wow.
But I never really worked out the logistics part of it.
Oh.
But all I knew as a child was that I will work very hard in life. I will work very hard in life to be a broadcaster, and I will work very hard in life to be a doctor. So when I completed my studies, which we did not really touch much on, because I had to struggle, to get my education. I had to leave my village. I had to leave my village to go to Philadelphia, a place called Dennilton, because our village was a new village, like I already alluded to, yes, and we could only go up to Standard 4. To further my studies beyond Standard 4, I had to go to another village, and there is a white man who happened to be a doctor at Philadelphia Hospital, Dr. Robertson, who helped my grandparents to pay my fees because I was his patient. He treated me for my ailments. Oh. So then in Dennilton, I went up to Form 3 at a time, and then I had to go to a high school to do maths and science. But I'm still going towards your question. And then I also, subsequent to that, I went to the mines to work for a few years, in the late 70s to get money to further my studies, because I have always been in and out of school, to augment, to get money to further my studies.
Yes.
And but after my grandmother passed on in 71, in July, the 29th of July, 1971, my grandmother passed on. And then later on in October of 1979, my grandfather passed on. Then I was left all by myself. But I was still at the mines at the time. And I then decided that it was time now to go to and further my studies.
Yes.
I went to the University of the North to do a BSc, because at the time, to get entry into medicine, you had to do first year BSc, and then you join the medical stream. And I was at the University of the North, 1980 and 81. I couldn't finish because I couldn't pay the university fees. The university excluded me. They kicked me out based on the fact that I owe them money, and now I was stranded and I looked for a job. And I looked for a job, and it took me a few months to look for a job, and ultimately, I'm not going to give you the details as to how it happened, but I found myself at SABC. And then that's how I joined SABC, the 1st of September, 1982.
Wow.
Then I joined Radio Zulu as one of the... It was a milestone for me. It was a milestone for me. It was for me a dream. It was for me something strange. It was for me unbelievable that the people that I idolized, my icons, my heroes, for me to work next to Joshua Mlaba, for me to sit in an office next to Mduduzi Hlophe, for me to be said to be a colleague of Gaibon Mpanza, who Gaibon Mpanza then was the principal announcer, for me to be said, I work with Kansas City, I am a colleague of Kansas City. For me to be said, I'm Diti Ngwenya's colleague, it was unbelievable. But nonetheless, I was one of them. In 1982, the 1st of September, I think it was a Wednesday, when I joined SABC at Auckland Park. As to how that happened, now you must understand, my life is characterized, and by a lot of miracles. There are a lot of miracles that happened along the way. But, there is a book that I wrote which has got all the details here.
Okay, we're going to talk about it as you see there.
Yes, I'm just trying to sketch, a little, a vague picture. And, if what I'm saying is confusing, then I'm happy that it's confusing so that people can buy the book. So that because the book is straightforward. I know right now we're just mixing issues now.
Yeah, true.
But Lebo, that's how I joined SABC. But then your question was, how did I leave SABC to become a doctor? Or you're not there yet?
No, I'm not there yet. So now you're in the SABC?
Yes, I'm in the SABC.
As a sports broadcaster?
Yeah, bro.
All right. So when you look back, now you're at the SABC, and you look back to the days where you used to hear these people on the radio. Mm-hmm. So what did they teach you? What skills did they teach you that you implemented when you were on radio? Well, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from them. Remember, during those days in radio, the main station was in Durban. Yes. And we were kind of a branch in Johannesburg. And in Johannesburg, when I joined SABC in Johannesburg, Mduduzi Hlophe was my senior. I really learned a lot from him. He taught me how to translate, because we received stuff, we received written material, written in English and Afrikaans, and we had to translate that into Zulu. And for me now, with my not so good Zulu from the Transvaal, I had to adapt and to adjust and to do things the way things needed to be done on Radio Zulu, which is where people speak pure Zulu from KZN, and now I had to, yes, of course, one of my subjects, up to grade 12, was Zulu. And, I was a hard worker at school, and I read almost each and every Zulu book that was available on the shelves. And not only Zulu, even Shakespeare. Don't be surprised that I'm wearing glasses. It's not for decoration purposes. It's because I damaged my eyes in the process of reading over the years. I was, I'm saying it in modesty. Even if I have to say it myself, I was a profound reader to the point that even my mother's sisters and some relatives called me abnormal. They said I had an abnormal appetite for reading. And but now the point is I read a lot of Zulu books, and to a point where, But then when I joined Zulu, then now the radio station, I had to learn from my colleagues how to speak proper Zulu acceptable to the listeners.
Okay.
Ayebo mfowethu. And a lot of other things, and then how to conduct yourself.
Yes.
I say, you must understand that we were the celebrities of the time, and know how to conduct yourself, and how to address people, and how to be humble.
Wow.
And my colleagues, and occasionally then we would visit Durban and mingle with our colleagues in Durban.
Oh, okay.
But I learned so much from them. I was a young boy. I was a youngster. I was 28 when I joined SABC.
Wow.
And those people who have been, on radio, unfortunately, when I joined SABC, one of my heroes was no longer there, Elijah Teta Masumbuga.
Yes.
Who was for me the pioneer soccer commentator in the country, and to say Masumbuga was good, I think it's an understatement. He was far less. He was greater than that, And today, you listen to people. People have a baseline that I want to be like so and so. I want to be like so and so. Elijah Teta Masumbuga had no reference point. He had to be original in everything.
Wow.
Wasumulize into Elijah Teta Masumbuga Donsintambo. He had to. He was actually the one who coined and who came with a vocabulary to broadcast soccer.
Wow.
Unfortunately, he was no longer there, but the rest of many of the guys, were still present when I joined them.
Okay. On our first meeting, I like what you said when it came to content, you as a presenter had to go out and source your own content. You mentioned that you also went to the field to talk to the players if they had a match, maybe on Saturday. So now I want to ask you this question, because now we have radio personalities who have content producers. So how difficult was it for you to come up with your own show for that day?
It was not really difficult. It was something that we enjoyed. We enjoyed the freedom.
Okay.
We, the radio presenters of my era, we had a freedom to, you just be given a program, Ronnie, this is your program, and you'll only get guidelines, and for example, when I was a football commentator, remember, we were, today I see, sports. Today you have to be broader than the Ronima Silelas. When you do sport, you have to do golf, you have to do cricket. Can you believe me? Up until today, I don't understand cricket.
Welcome to the club. I don't understand it myself.
And you know what? I'm not bothered. I don't even like it. I don't care. So you I'm a football specialist.
Yes.
I'm a football specialist, and I'm telling you, when I did football during my time, I remember when I did my first derby.
Yes.
I did my first derby Sunday, the 10th of June.
How were you nervous?
1984. That's when I did 2 days after my birthday.
Look, how do you remember all these dates? You're like a journalist.
So I prepared for my first derby. And I knew that my future as a soccer and a football commentator was riding upon this derby.
Yes.
And I had to prepare for it. And I learned and I learned how to prepare for a derby. For that derby and for all the other derbies. If I have a game in front of me, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates, I am not too sure whether, the passion about derbies today is what it was then. But let me tell you, during my time, a derby was a derby.
Wow.
And people would start talking about a derby 2-3 weeks before the derby. And people would talk about Kaizer Chiefs. People would start talking about Orlando Pirates.
So,
people would talk about Jomo Sono.
Yes.
Jomo Sono versus Ace Nzwelengwe.
Wow.
When I did my first derby, Yes, of course, I was anxious. Mm-hmm. But how I would prepare for it, if I am to go and do a derby, I would start by phoning Mr. Mutaung. I would phone Mr. Mutaung and say, Prakeza.
Now, this is gathering content.
I'm gathering content now. I'm getting to your point. I would go to Kaiser, Prakeza, hey man, you know what, Prakeza? Allow me, man, to interview your boys. You know, I just want 1 minute from all the players. And from there, I would go to Orlando Pirates and interview. The following Monday, I'll go to Chiefs. Tuesday, I go to Pirates. And, interview all of them. You know, there were players during those days. You know, you had Stian Kamp, you had Bashin Mahlangu. You know, on the other side, you know, you had Abo Max Mapunyani and you had Abo Patrick Ace in Solengwe. Abo Patrick Ace not so long ago. In America, they called him Patrick Ace not so long ago. And then on Wednesday, I would go to the hostel, you know, to the taxi rank, you know, to Deep Blue Hostel and get my content from there.
Wow.
And on Thursday, I will sit down and, you know, and collate and, you know, and everything, and, you know, to arrange and all my content, and, you know, and then Friday morning, I will start playing my tapes. And then come on Saturday, I would be ready. Then, you know, 3 o'clock, then I will be at the stadium. And I will asuka lahlala, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates.
Lasuka lahlala.
Yeah.
So how do you leave the SABC and why?
Yeah. Now we're getting to a very difficult part now, and I was very passionate. I was very extremely so. I always say, you know, to be a broadcaster is my passion.
Yes.
And to be a doctor is my calling. And to be a teacher is my life. And to be a Christian is who I should be.
Okay.
In the eyes of God. I enjoyed my time as a presenter for the 10 years. I really enjoyed it, and it was. However, I had to go and pursue my dream of becoming a doctor.
Oh,
Ronnie Masilela was never going to be complete if I'm not a doctor.
So
if I wasn't a doctor.
Dreams you had as a child.
Yes, as a child, you know, because I dropped out at TEFT trying to pursue my studies as a doctor, and I failed. And I had no peace within myself, despite the fact that I did, you know, broadcasting with passion. But I never really had peace. I knew, you know, that, you know, there is, I have to become a doctor.
Yes.
And, you know, one day, my wife happens to be a nurse, and she was working at the time at Guesbierker's clinic next to Baragwanath, and I went to fetch her, and we were driving past Baragwanath Hospital, and I was saying to her, you know, one day I will be a doctor at this hospital. I will come back one day and be a doctor at Baragwanath, and should that
Speaking things into existence.
Yes, and I was saying to her, should that not happen, I pity you, my dear, because you will have a problem.
Wow.
You will have a serious problem because Ronnie Masilela will die. You will organize a funeral, you'll organize a coffin, and you'll think you'll take me to Avalon to go and bury me. And it's not going to happen. Ronnie Masilela will not go into any grave if he's not a doctor. I will refuse.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll refuse to go into that grave. And then she kept quiet, she listened, and she said to me, you know what, I would suggest that you go and study and become a doctor. And yeah, then we had to rearrange our lives, we had to rearrange our things. And then, and then I started applying to medical schools. In fact, I started early. I started quite early. I was rejected by medical schools for a period of close to for about 5 years. all medical schools in the country didn't want to take me.
What was the reason, if I may ask?
They told me that I'm too old. They told me that my marks were too poor.
Wow. And that somehow did not discourage you?
Well, nothing was going to discourage me, not even them. With their one professor at Wits told me that I was never going to be a doctor. I went to Wits. It was mid-January 1990 when I went to Wits to go and plead with one of the professors to allow me to do BSc. And the professor looked at my credentials and all the papers. But remember, I am a product of the 1976 riots. During 1976, I was in matric and I dropped out. I did my matric part-time, and as a result, my results were not what they would have been if I had been a full-time student.
Yes.
So now the professor looked at all those, and the professor said to me, my boy, I've taken a look at all your papers, and I think you have a very prestigious job at the SABC. You have a very prestigious job at SABC. Carve yourself a niche within, I'm quoting now, carve yourself a niche within the structures of the SABC and work yourself up into a position you may become a manager or a director within the structures of SABC. But as for being a doctor, my boy, you will never be a doctor.
Wow.
At that point, then he said to me, listen, because we've got two streams at Wits. We've got two streams. We've got a fast stream. He's now talking about BSc. We've got a fast stream and a slow stream. So we only take the best students from the fast stream. And the fast stream means you must get your BSc in record time in 3 years. You must get not less than 65% in all your subjects, right from the first year up to the last year. I don't see you, my boy, getting those kind of marks. Therefore, forget about being a doctor. You will never be one.
In exact those words?
In exact, I quoted him. And at that point, then I realized that I'm wasting my time. I was in the wrong office. I stood up. And I stood in front of the professor on my way out as a parting shot. I said to him, Prof, with due respect, can I put this to you, Prof? You will not determine what Ronnie Masilela will become. God will decide, and time will tell. And one day, Prof, just one day, I will be back, and I will be standing in front of you to tell you that the young man that you turned down in the middle of January 1990 is now a doctor.
Wow.
I have made 2 attempts to visit my dear professor, and I hope nothing will happen to him until we meet. I still need to meet him.
Okay. So when did you complete your studies?
My medical degree.
Yes, as a doctor now.
Okay. When did I complete my studies? On the 7th of April 2000, at 5 to 5 that evening.
I'm so shocked at how you remember the dates and the time. Wow.
That's when I got a message that I'm through. I've passed I'm through with my studies.
Yes.
Yeah, 7 April 2000, I was at home. It was a Friday, because I had a sub. I had a sub in pediatrics. This is one of the subjects that was giving me a run for my money at the medical school. I failed PEDS and they added another 3 months because I would have completed in 1999. But I had to spend more time in psychiatry. I didn't fail psychiatry. It's just that I missed out on psychiatry because I registered late because I did not have registration fee. Oh. I needed 2,500 to register for my final year. And I struggled because I spent about 2 weeks running around to borrow money from friends. So now that delayed my entry into my final year.
And by the time I came, they were over with the psychiatry block. I joined them only in the second block. So, but PEDS, so they added they added 3 months for psych, and they added 3 months for PEDS. And that period then ended on Friday, the 7th of April 2000. So now on that day was my final year to do my final exam. And after the exam, I drove home to go and arrange a Thanksgiving prayer that evening.
Yes.
And then I arrived home, and then I arranged, the Christians to tell them, let's gather at my place at 6 o'clock. So, and then at 5 to 5, it was, cell phones, they just made their entry, and I didn't have a cell phone, obviously. We're using a landline.
Oh, okay.
And then at 5 to 5, the phone rang. And then it was Jakey, my friend, Dr. Tobani, and who phoned me to tell me that the results were released and that I had passed my studies.
So how was the feeling when you got those news?
Yeah, well, that's a kind of feeling that words cannot describe.
Yes.
No, words cannot describe what I was feeling. It was, maybe the title of the book captures and encapsulates that.
Yes.
Because it was so difficult. It was so difficult buying a loaf of bread was an issue. Because the last 4 years on campus at the university, I was not allowed to get food from the university, from the cafeteria. I had to fend for myself, and so I had to, during weekends when I go home, I would buy a loaf of bread, and I would try and stretch that loaf of bread as much as I could.
Yes.
And then when that bread is finished, then I know, then it means there's nothing beyond that. And then at some point, I at the university kicked me out of my room, and I spent 2 weeks sleeping in the car. And then there were a lot of other difficulties. And when I heard that it was over, I couldn't believe it.
I can imagine.
And hence the title of the book. I couldn't believe that it was not a dream.
Wow.
Because the way I was struggling at school, I never believed that it will one day be over. And
wow.
This is why I'm saying when I was told that I passed my studies, I was bamboozled. I was perplexed, confounded and confused.
Hey? Big English now. Hey? You're proving what I in Fundi. Wow, no, I hear you. Before we end the show, can you quickly touch on the book? What is the book about, and how did it come about?
The book is really, the purpose of the book is really to put my life into perspective, to capture, to encapsulate, and to give details, as much as I could, about the struggles that I went through, and also to encourage other people who are in a similar situation. I know many of our black people go through what I went through, and it is just to say to them, your past must never decide your future. Yeah, despite the difficult background that you come from, there is hope. Is to give hope, is to encourage, and to tell people that yes, you can. That is the purpose of the book.
Wow, I would love to read the book. Wow. Let's get into the good news.
The good news, yes.
The channel. You're about to open a YouTube channel or a podcast, if I may put it that way. What is the channel going to be about? And why did you decide to start the channel?
Thank you so much for that. That's a very, I am, today is also a very special day for me, and I thank you for coming yourself, Lebo, and for Ernest, and also for Linda Mlaba, the son of our legendary presenter and colleague of mine. You know, you are the crew that made all this possible to help me launch this channel, and this is Sports Talk by Dr. Runima Silela, and the purpose is of this show is to visit the past.
Yes.
To visit the past. I have rubbed shoulders. I have seen. I have heard about. Even long before I came, you know, I became a football presenter. There were people who played football. There were people who played football during the time when I was a presenter. And I want to remind South Africa of those people. I want to bring
I want them to relive the memories.
I want people to relive the memories of the 80s and the 70s.
Wow.
To bring back those memories, and hence this is Sports Talk with me, Dr. Runima Silela, and our slogan here is we are looking at lessons from yesterday to improve today.
Wow.
For a better tomorrow.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So that is the purpose of the show, and I've just put something here, which I need to go through so that people can understand better as to how the show is. So what we are saying here is we are focusing on those forgotten heroes. Now, you'll remember, those are the people who entertained, who served, and who gave hope to millions of South Africans, especially the black people, during very difficult times. Stadia, were packed to capacity. Where people wanted to see these icons and heroes display their God-given talents. They did all this very gracefully, with aplomb, commitment, and dedication, without any decent remuneration. But week in and week out, they remained loyal to South Africans, and without failing. You saw on this program, we want to know why. What is it that really pushed them? What is it that made them to continue relentlessly? Yes. They sacrificed their families to entertain the nation, knowing full well that there was no money involved. It was a sacrifice indeed, because most of them, maybe all of them, had jobs like all other people. Now these people then have to go to wake up in the morning, go and put in a day's job, to go to their normal jobs, put in a day's work, and in the evenings, they only after instead of going home, they would grab their bags and go to the training fields to go and train. They had to do this because they had to work, because for them, football couldn't put food on the table.
Yes.
And, they spent very little time with their families, because from work they must go and train. Only after training, maybe, at about 9 or 8, do they go home, spend time with their families. Thereafter, and then following morning they wake up and they must go to work.
Yes.
Yeah, and now, so we really want to salute these people. We want to know who they are. We want to know where they are as we speak. Many of them we know because of the passage of time. Many of them have passed on. And to them we say, may the good Lord, may their souls rest in peace. And may the good Lord be with their families. But for those few that are still around, we just want to say to them, some of us have not forgotten about them. Yes. And that is the purpose of this show. We want to bring them back. We want people to know about them. The purpose of this program is therefore to afford them a platform to bring the past forward. Okay. We want to hear them. We want to see them. We want to know how they see things today.
we want to share in their wisdom for a better tomorrow. And above all, we want to say to them, thank you. We use this platform, therefore, to salute and to celebrate them. We pay homage and we honor them. Silver and gold we may not have,
yes,
but we want them to know that we are profoundly and eternally grateful for all their sacrifices over the years. That is the purpose of the show. Sports Talk with Dr. Ronnie Masilela.
I would ask for a round of applause. No, that's good. That's good. I want to teach you a couple of things that you normally say, when you close off your show. Please like, subscribe, comment.
Oh, okay.
This is a YouTube channel, so you need to know those things.
Oh, yes. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, so you can say like, subscribe, comment. Here's a pen.
Oh, is that in conclusion?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can say like.
In conclusion, yes, I say please.
Please like.
Please like.
Share.
Share. Yeah.
Subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe.
And comment.
Yes.
To my YouTube channel.
To my YouTube channel.
And then you mention the name of the show.
Sports Talk.
After that, 10 out of 10.
You. Okay.
And action.
In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, please like, share, subscribe, and comment to my YouTube channel. This is Sports Talk with Dr. Ronnie Masilela. Thank you.
We out.